Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. On my channel, we typically look at D&D adventures, especially some of the new, really interesting ones that are coming out of the indie scene. But today we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of looking at some of my favorite adventures and great examples of adventure writing, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to look at some of the worst examples, or one of the worst examples of adventure writing that I've run into for a very long time. In case you can't tell from the screen right here, this is Feast of Legends, which is a system/adventure put out by the Wendy's fast food chain. If you're not aware of this, this came out in October of last year and caused a big stir for a little while. And I think the furor has kind of died down. People aren't really talking about it as much, which is good because it gives us a little time to really process it and go through it in detail, see what it does well and what it does poorly. I'm going through this step by step and looking at some of the things that really stand out to me in terms of problems with adventure writing. Before we get started though, this video is brought to you by my Kickstarter. The Waking of Willoughby Hall is a short adventure that I'm in the middle of publishing on Kickstarter. If you want to see the kind of adventures that I like and that I write for my players, go check it out. I'll put a link down in the description below. So we start off in the nation of Freshtovia. Everything is themed around fast food. There's a lot of subtle or not so subtle digs at other fast food companies. I'm not really going to go through the system involved with Feast of Legends. It's fine by and large. It looks like a tweaked version of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Nothing really remarkable about it. The main thing that I would point out about the system is that you can't lose, really. You have hit points, but when your hit points go down to 0, you pass out from hunger, and the next time your party rests, you come right back again. So there's no real way to die or be taken out of the adventure in any kind of permanent fashion. And that is a theme that we are going to be seeing a lot of as we go through this. So we start off with this map here with a bunch of different locations. And we have part 1 of the adventure here. So this is done in 5 parts. And it is extremely linear in the sense that it really does intend for you to go through it in order. And we'll see some examples of that kind of railroading mindset as we look through this adventure. So I have put red boxes around things that stood out to me in particular. So for example, this is right at the beginning of the city gates. So you go into the main city and you're looking for Queen Wendy. And if you try and go into the castle and meet her, there's guards in the way. So can you negotiate with the guards? Can you try and talk your way past them, sneak past them, climb over the walls? No, you cannot. So if you, when they try and reach the other side of the crowd, they will be met by guards who are uninterested in speaking to random people. They will say things like, move along, or the queen will be ready when she is ready. Any attempt to attack a guard will be automatically swatted away and will result in a guaranteed hit, a slap to the face dealing 1 hit points of damage. So it's just a brick wall. You can't even fight them. There's this kind of video game-esque mentality here where there's just like these hard walls everywhere to prevent the players from deviating at all from the creator's vision. I think that's really problematic because it's a real diversion from what tabletop role-playing games do well, which is that they allow players to attempt anything. But a lot of people writing adventures for these systems try and restrict players as much as possible in order to make things simpler and more streamlined for the game master. But this often causes a lot of problems for the players who feel completely restricted and like they're just on a railroad chugging along. So for example, you try and explore the restaurant, everything is locked down, you can't go into any of the rooms. You just wander around this city for a while. And what you're doing is looking for the plot, because nothing is going to happen until you find the plot. The plot's waiting for you. Where is it? So you find a guy, this mysterious cloaked figure, standard D&D trope, and he tells you what you have to do. You need to go to the French Fry Forest. It's a bit of a tongue twister. And then down here at the bottom, if the party is foolhardy enough to venture south, instead of going to the next stage of the plot, have it face an overwhelming number of freezer burns, which I suppose is some sort of enemy. When the freezer burns knock them out, have them return to Freshtovia and be mocked openly by every citizen. So, again, another example of railroading. But what this does, because this is, I assume, an adventure in a system targeted at new players, right? Most people who are familiar with Wendy's probably haven't played a role-playing game, just because most people haven't played a role-playing game. And the system is simple enough that I think it really is aimed at new players. But it's telling new game masters that this is how you structure an adventure. You have an idea for where players go, and if they deviate from your idea of where they should go next, you should just punish them or just refuse to let that happen. And that is a real shame. So the main section here, the adventure portion, after we leave the city, we're trying to stop this force called hunger, because this is all fast food themed. We're going to the French fry forest, and we can see from the map here what's going on. So it's a linear adventure. It's a linear dungeon. You are going in a straight line over here from room to room to room to room to room. Yeah, there's a diversion right here. You can go this way, but it's a dead end. And then you just go back again. And then you just follow along here and you just trigger the events one after the other. And that's it. There are virtually no choices to make. There's no diverging paths. You can't decide to explore things in a different direction. It's just go through things in the order that's been predetermined for you. And things keep locking down behind you. So whenever you go to a new room, the way back grows over. So you can't even make a choice to go back. There is no choice except go to the next room, hit everything with a sword until it stops moving, and then go to the next room, and then just repeat until the adventure is over. Stuff like this really makes me wonder why players would even be involved in the adventure at all. Because clearly, the reason why you would have players in an adventure is to make decisions. Because they're going to make decisions that you don't expect, and that's where the fun comes from. But if players only have one option, basically in each scene, they can't retreat, they can't use creative tactics to get around the situation, they can't find alternate paths, they just go straight forward, then why do you even need players? So for example here, a passageway appears after the beasts of hunger are vanquished. The battle was your first real challenge, and stopping for a meal or snack could prove beneficial, etc., etc. So you beat some guys and a new passageway opens. You can't even run past enemies to the next section. Everything is locked down as completely as possible. Skipping ahead a little bit, returning to Freshtovia after defeating the bad guys and going through each of the rooms in order. Approaching the castle. Once you get back to the city, the guards appear and they take you to the castle. And they're forceful about it. They just grab you and they drag you in there because that's where the plot is. That's where we're going. There is a little bit of exceptions to the things I'm talking about here. So you can explore the city. There's some festival games. So there's a couple little mini games you can play here. That's good because that gives players a few more options, things that they can do besides just march along this plot. And then we start our part 2, Trouble at Frosty Canyon. And here's a different problem. Everything that's in italics here that I have put a red outline around is box text. This is read aloud text intended for you to read out loud to your party. It says so near the beginning of the adventure. And there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 paragraphs of read aloud text. You're just reading just like a page of text out loud to your players. I don't know about you, but after about 2 sentences of this, my eyes just glaze over. I don't want someone to read a novel to me. I want them to just have a sense of what the environment is like and what the characters are like there and what their motivations are. And then we can just talk back and forth. We can figure this out. I don't like being in a choose your own adventure novel where there's just like set text and then you just press the button yes or no at the end of it. That's really frustrating. After the interview is over, can you explore the throne room? No, you cannot. The guards won't let you. All right. So where are we going to go next? Where is the next part of the plot? Well, there's some options down here. So this looks like a nice change of pace. The Eastern Road. If the adventurers choose to go to Dave's Double Hills, the next site, then you'll need to skip ahead to that area. And then the road south lists 2 town names, BIGGIE, VALE, and Frosty Canyon. A few hours travel on the road leads you to a split in the path. You can go one way or the other. So that's nice. We have a couple choices here. Although if you go to places other than the plot, there's not a lot really there. Apart from a different section of the plot that you're supposed to unlock later. So how that's supposed to work is not really clear here. And hilariously, one of these options that you can go to, BIGGIE VALE, if you try and go there, we'll see this later on as we read. If you try and go there without having unlocked the correct plot options, a magical wind blows you back onto the road and prevents you from entering that area. When I was reading this just by myself, I think I just shouted "what" out loud while I was reading it. It's crazy. It's just some of the most egregious examples of railroading that I have ever read. This is not how you write an adventure. You don't create plots, you create situations. You create environments. You create an interesting environment that's full of rewards, but also perils, things preventing you from getting those rewards. You have different factions, you have different characters with their own motivations. You create an interesting, complicated situation. But you don't tell the game master or the players what they should be doing, because that's the point of these types of games, to make those choices on your own. You create a situation, and then you, as the game master, get to see how it unfolds. And you should know enough about the situation that you can react in an appropriate manner as you are guiding this adventure along. Right? Because you're not guiding things in one direction. You're just trying to keep the world consistent. You're trying to keep all the different players, all the NPCs, acting in a rational manner that fits their motivations. Doing that is far more entertaining than just marching along a pre-written plot. So we head down to Frosty Canyon here, and there's a couple things to do. There's a couple characters to talk to. You can get some upgrades for your weapons. This is also a pattern that we see throughout this adventure. There are different special items and weapon upgrades and things like that, but all of the magic items you get are all combat focused. That's not necessarily a bad thing. People do like combat, but they're all stuff that just do a little bit of extra damage, or your chance to hit increases, and so on. There's none of the creative problem-solving type magic items that are far more interesting. Stuff that, like, you could change your environment in some way, or it allows you to move in a new way, or it allows you to see things that other people couldn't see. There's many different, very creative, evocative types of magic that you could put into these types of games instead of just your numbers increase, because that's the least flavorful way to do magic. That is not just constrained to this adventure. That's very common in a lot of adventures that I've read. Giving people adventures or giving people items that aren't combat related and just alter how you interact with the world opens up creative problem solving. When players have stuff like that, they're going to be much more willing to just deal with their environment in new and creative ways, and to use it in an unorthodox manner to try and get around problems, or do things without combat. Players are more motivated to do that when you give them options. So down here I have a little section. Before the party can fully defeat the Beef Bandit, so your current villain, he will disengage from the conflict, jump onto a nearby cart and say, da-da-da, and a new guy pops out. So you can't even really beat this guy. Someone else just sort of appears whenever you try and fight him. Moving along, lighting of the Bacon Beacon. So here's another example of a good example of choices being given to the players. So over the course of this adventure, they can collect a couple keys, and you find a magic door, and depending on which key you put into the door, you get a different experience inside. That's neat. That's an actual choice that makes a difference in the story. So it's great to see stuff like that. The stuff that you get, depending on the key that you put in, doesn't make a huge difference though, and it's mostly just upgrades your combat abilities, it looks like, which is unfortunate. Moving down here, so you approach Fort Baconator, which is apparently a Wendy's product, and if the party attempts to move, you find your feet are currently stuck to the ground, seemingly magically. Any attempt to interrupt the constable will be met by a cry of "Silence, you petulant fool," and a backhand, which does 1 hit points of damage to the person who spoke up. So you approach this ice fortress. An ice villain approaches, freezes you. You cannot escape. There's no rolls you can make. You can't use creative problem solving to get out. Nope, you're just stuck permanently. If you say something, you take 1 damage. And now you are captured. No choices are involved here. It just, Now, this is the next part of the plot. This is what's going to happen. By this point, if I was playing it, I would just be completely checked out. Because why am I in this game if I can't make any choices? Or why am I playing if my choices don't mean anything? We have another short little dungeon. And as you can see from the map here, it is all completely linear. It is one room, followed by the next room, followed by the next room. Just do them in order. That's what you're supposed to do. Just do them. There's a little bit of loops here. I like loops in dungeons because it does give you at least another path to take. However, in this case, it doesn't matter because you're trying to get, over here anyway. So if you go through this loop, you end up in the exact same place no matter what. And tactically, it doesn't seem to make a huge difference. So that's kind of a wasted opportunity. More of this linear dungeon. We just march through. There's a bad guy in one room. You fight him. Sometimes there's a little puzzle, but the puzzles are all very straightforward. And if the players can't figure out the puzzle, the game basically says, tell them the answer, or give them so many hints that there's no way that they could not get the answer, which really makes you wonder why the puzzle is there to start with. If you're going to put a puzzle that you need to solve to progress, you just shouldn't put one there. I mean, you shouldn't have a necessary progression line either. Both of those things are problems. Moving ahead, we're all the way down to BIGGIE VALE. So this is the area where it says, if the party approaches BIGGIE VALE before lighting the bacon beacon, they will find a mysterious magic wind keeping them from entering. So yeah, don't go off the path, ladies and gentlemen. We can explore the little town. There's a cemetery. You want to investigate the cemetery? A lot of people will. What's buried there? Is there some evil skeletons? Is there something evil that we can dig up and unearth? Maybe there's treasure underground. Some of the stones will be warm to the touch. If for some reason you are guiding a bunch of degenerates who think it would be fun to dig up a grave, they will be punished, right? Punish your players when they don't do what you want. Have anyone who breaks the ground here make an Arcana save. If they do not get 15 or higher, they will take 1d6 of magical damage. They must make this roll each time they break the ground. If they somehow successfully dig something up, make it attack them and make sure they know you're very disappointed in them. So if players somehow manage to think their way, if they actually use creative problem solving to come up with a way around this arbitrary thing that you've set up, just punish them for no particular reason. There's a couple little mini games here, similar to the festival we looked at before, where you can get your fortune told. And there's some random tables here. Random tables are always fun because random tables are not controlled by the adventure, right? You're never going to know what's going to show up. When I run adventures, I love to have random tables that change the adventure every time you play it, where you might roll to see how this particular monster is disposed towards you. He might actually be friendly. He might be very vicious. You roll to see when monsters might show up, how far away they are from you. You can roll for lots of different aspects of the game that make it fun for the game master because it's a surprise for them as well. And they're going to have to adapt to that. And they make the world feel like it's a living place and it's not just a series of locked down things that are waiting for the players to poke them. So random tables are great. These random tables don't seem to really affect the game much at all since they're just fortunes, but they are fun. Players love rolling on random tables in my experience. We find a new NPC who tells us where to go. And because that's how this game works, people just tell you where to go, and then you go there. And we find the Deep Freeze, the final level, a ghost town. We can have another linear dungeon. We march through this in order, one step at a time, until we get to the end. And we fall down into an ice pit where we're going to have our final confrontation. So I'll give you one example back here. So during this battle, right, I'm on the wrong page here. There we go. So you're fighting this ice gorgon dragon thing. And if the beast explodes into a million tiny ice crystals, as you've become accustomed to, this is after you defeat it. But with greater force than you've ever seen with other enemies. The force of the Frieza Gorgon's defeat causes the lake beneath it to crack. You attempt to run, right? It tells you what you're doing. So you're attempting to run. If you say, I'm not attempting to run, well, no, you're attempting to run. But the ice shatters underneath your feet and you begin to fall. So player choice and player agency is just totally negated. And you're on a script now. You've activated a cutscene. I also love how it assumes that you're going to fight it. You can't think your way past it. You can't befriend it. You can't trick it. There's only one thing you can do, and that's fight it. You explore this little dungeon down here, and there's a bottomless hole because bottomless holes are great. If a player jumps in the hole, they will scream until their sound fades and then find themselves back in the room below the ice, in the room below the lake, with a permanent -1 reduction to their base intelligence score. The way the system works, in most cases, that won't even affect anything. This is really just a bottomless hole, but the party will almost definitely do something very stupid here, so be ready. So it's a bottomless hole unless your players test the fact that it's a bottomless hole, and then it's not a bottomless hole. So there should be no real consequences for any of the players' actions, even if they do something that the game world has clearly set up is dangerous and it's going to kill you. If they do it, just give them a pass because players' choices shouldn't mean anything. There's no trust in this game for the players or for the GM for that matter. No trust that either of them can actually own the game in any significant sense. Everything has to be hedged to make sure that people don't go outside the boundaries. No one's coloring outside of the lines because heaven forbid your players should do something unexpected. Eventually we fight the bad guy and the end. And that's it. There's a little bit left at the end here. There's 2 other locations on this map that you can visit. However, there's essentially nothing there. So it's a little unclear why those locations are there. For example, here we have Nuggeton. And it says, though he invited the party to visit, it seems like the Prince of Nuggeton has not returned, and the tower is currently locked to outsiders until Prince Carter returns. So why did we go here? I don't know. It's not like every place needs to have monsters to fight. Far from it. There's a million things that you could do in these tiny little towns. You could just set up an interesting situation. You could set up social conflicts. All sorts of things that you could do that give players a challenge and an opportunity to think outside the box, come up with some creative solutions, and really engage with the world. Really take initiative, create their own adventure in the sense that they set a goal and they set out to do it. And then how they do it is up to them, and the game master just tries to neutrally arbitrate how their actions work without trying to force them one way or another. But there's no attempt to set up situations like this throughout this adventure. Same thing here, Costa del Spicy. Nothing really to do there. There's a couple little games you can play, but no situations that require any sort of thought on the player's part. So we have in this location, there's the Order of the Spicy Chicken Nuggets Temple. There currently seems to be no way into the temple. The only door, which is facing the beach, is sealed by magical means. If the party is really trying hard to get into this temple, make it clear that it is currently not possible. Shut down that creative thinking whenever you can. There's also an inn, but it tells you the Spicy Inn isn't, the Spicy Inn is not very memorable. So that's good to know. Some magic items, but it's almost all of them are just about increasing your damage or attack numbers. So not a lot of creative problem solving there. And then there's some monsters here at the back. So overall, I hope I've really covered my problems with this, if that wasn't clear enough already. Adventures are there for interaction. That's what they're there for. They're there to give players a lot of things to do, but they're there to also give them the incentive to create their own adventure, right? You put some rewards around them, make sure the players know where the rewards are so they can head for them and figure out by themselves how they're going to accomplish it. In a good adventure, you might not even have a way to solve it, or you may not even have thought of one. Most of the time, you don't need to do that. Players are much more intelligent than games give them credit for, and they're going to outthink game masters all day long. And to me, that's the best part of playing these games. Watching players, outsmart me. I'm not trying to outsmart them. I'm just putting really hard obstacles all over the place, and then just seeing how crazy they get, figuring out a way to get past those obstacles. I'll put links down below to where you can look at Feast of Legends yourself if you want to, but I don't recommend playing it, but maybe there's some things that you can loot from it. The whole idea of a fast food themed fantasy world isn't necessarily a bad idea. It's kind of goofy. You could draw a lot of parodies from it, and this book does try to do it. The people writing this book do seem to be having a fun time. They do seem to genuinely enjoy role-playing games, and the book is well written in the sense that it's free of a lot of errors, it flows pretty well, and so on. But in terms of the structure that you would need to make an engaging adventure, it is seriously lacking. So that's it for my review today. I hope it was useful and instructive, mostly just because it's the opposite of what you want to do when writing your own adventure. If you want to check out some of the adventures that I've written, I'll put links down in the description below. And of course, you can check out my Kickstarter where I am publishing my own right now. Before we go, a quick shout out to some of my patrons over on Patreon, including Star, Rory Starks, Alan Kapowski, Morgan Childs, and Billy Doherty, as well as some of my questing knights, the people who are supporting me at the highest level, Jeremy Hart Illos, James Shevlin, and Tina Lennox. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.